Who is the richest person to have ever lived? You'd think that would be a simple question, right? But the answer, well, it's going to take us on this wild journey through time, from ancient kings all the way to modern tech titans. And it's going to force us to completely redefine what it even means to be rich. So, just to try and wrap our heads around the kind of money we're talking about today, think about this. For an average person to earn what Elon Musk is worth right now, they'd have to work for 8 million years. I mean, that's 30 times longer than we, as humans, have even been on this planet. It's a number so huge, it's kind of hard to even imagine. And that, of course, leads us to the big question. With all that mind-boggling wealth, does Elon Musk actually hold the title for the richest human being of all time? Well, if you measure it in the most common way, the answer is a hard no. Actually, it's not even close. When you start digging back through history, you find these characters who make today's billionaires look, well, I wouldn't say broke, but definitely not like they're in the top spot. Okay, so to really find our answer, we have to start thinking bigger. We've got to look past just a simple number in a bank account. We need to ask ourselves, what does rich truly mean? Is it all about the cash you have, or is it something else entirely? Let me show you what I mean. On one hand, you have a guy like Pablo Escobar. His $80 billion fortune was almost all literal stocks of cash. So much cash that he spent $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to hold it all together. And on the other hand, you've got Joseph Stalin. He had pretty much zero personal money, but he had absolute total control over the entire Soviet Union, an economy we now value at about $10 trillion. He was so powerful, so feared, that when he had a stroke, nobody dared call a doctor for 12 hours. And right there, you see the two big ideas: wealth as cash versus wealth as pure control. All right, with that difference in mind, let's line up the contenders. We're going to jump in our time machine and meet some of history's absolute heavyweights, each one representing a totally different kind of wealth. Let's start in America's Gilded Age. This was an era of just maximum capitalism. You had these titans like Cornelius Vanderbilt, who dominated the railroads, and Andrew Carnegie, who built a steel empire. But the undisputed king of them all was John D. Rockefeller. By the 1880s, his company, Standard Oil, controlled a staggering 90% of all the oil in the United States. And here's the number that really matters. At his peak, back in 1913, Rockefeller's personal fortune was equal to 2% of the entire U.S. economy. Think about that. He wasn't just a rich guy. His wealth was a huge slice of America itself. He was, of course, the nation's first ever billionaire. But Rockefeller was hardly alone in history. I mean, the past is filled with these titans of wealth. You had bankers like Jakob Fugger, who owned 2% of Europe's economy in the 1500s. You had kings like Mansa Musa, who was so rich with gold that when he traveled, he could literally crash the economies of the countries he visited. And then you had emperors, Augustus Caesar, who basically owned the entire country of Egypt, and Genghis Khan, who controlled almost a quarter of the entire world's landmass. So when you look at those staggering numbers, it seems pretty clear, right? Musk doesn't really stand a chance. But here comes the twist. There's this one simple idea that changes absolutely everything. See, it's not just about how big your slice is. It's about how big the whole pie is. So look, here's the U.S. economy back in 1913. That tiny little slice, that 2%, that's John D. Rockefeller's entire fortune. And don't get me wrong, that is a huge percentage for one person to own, no question about it. But the key here is the size of the pie itself. Now, fast forward to today's economy, you can see Elon Musk's slice is actually smaller percentage-wise. It's about 1.4%. So yeah, in that sense, Rockefeller had him beat. But, and this is a huge but, the crucial difference is just how massive the overall pie is today. The total economic output of the United States now is, well, it's on a completely different level than it was a century ago. And here is the kicker. The entire U.S. economy is 22 times larger today than it was back in 1913. So even though Rockefeller had a bigger percentage, it was a percentage of a much, much smaller total. Musk's smaller slice of today's gigantic economic pie is, in real dollars, just way, way bigger. So now that we've redefined what wealth can mean, and we've put all of history into the right context, we can finally answer the question, who is the richest person to have ever lived? And the verdict is Elon Musk. You see, while other people in history might have owned a larger share of their smaller economies, Musk's fortune exists inside the wealthiest, most prosperous economic environment humanity has ever created. To put it another way, he's the biggest fish in the biggest pond that has ever existed. And there are three really good reasons why he takes the crown. First, his fortune is actually verifiable. It's documented in real time in stocks and assets, not just a historian's best guess. Second, unlike a king or a dictator, his wealth isn't tied to his political power. It wouldn't just vanish if he was overthrown. And finally, the power he has is technological, the kind of stuff that rulers like Caesar or Mansa Musa would have thought was pure magic. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, while one person might hold the title of richest, the really amazing story is how the entire pie of human wealth and prosperity has just kept growing for centuries. And if history is any guide, as that pie gets bigger, it's not just the wealthiest who benefit. Which kind of leaves us with one last big question. What will the biggest pond and the fish in it look like 100 years from now?